Welcome everyone to Keep It Classy Tech. In this video I'm going to show you how you can reduce the ABL effect on Sony OLED TVs using the A90J. Now this is only going to be in SDR. In HDR you have no choice but to use highest brightness settings, but in SDR you can reduce the ABL effect by turning down your peak luminance and up your brightness setting. So I'm going to start here with the brightness setting at 25 and the peak luminance at medium. And I'm going to measure a full field 100% window, and I'm also going to measure a 10% window. Over here I'm going to have 4 tabs open so I can switch back and forth between the 10 and 100% windows for both setting options. So you can see our first reading is 136 nits, and that's with the peak luminance at medium and the brightness at 25. Now I'm going to switch over to the 10% window size and take a reading on the second tab. So at the end of this video I will show exactly what ABL is, because there's a lot of confusion around it. It is not the dimming that takes place during games or sports or anything like that. So now at our 10% window with the peak luminance again at medium and the brightness at 25, it's 167 nits. Now I'm going to switch over to the other setting. So you can see there's a roughly 30 nit difference here between our 10% window and our full field window. So now I'm going to switch it over to brightness at 42 and peak luminance at low. This is going to result in the same brightness at the 10% window. However, the 100% window or larger window sizes will actually be brighter. With the peak luminance at a lower setting, the ABL is less aggressive. That means your high APL or high average picture level brightness scenes in SDR will be able to maintain just a little bit more brightness than if you were to use a higher peak luminance setting. Now if you're someone in a bright room and you're going to have peak luminance on medium or high with the brightness maxed out, then you're going to be dealing with more ABL. But if you're in a dark room setting and you're wondering if you should use a lower brightness setting with a higher peak luminance or a higher brightness with a lower peak luminance, this is just showing that you should use the higher brightness setting with the lower peak luminance setting. So now we're set back up to the full screen 100% size window, and we're going to take another reading. And this one's on tab 3. You can see 154, 155 nits. So we're about 20 nits higher than we were before. But now I'm going to measure the 10% window to show you that doing this at 42 brightness and low peak luminance is the same brightness as using 25 on the brightness and medium on the peak luminance. Again, this is done on the A90J. It will be the same concept on an A80J or another Sony OLED. The actual numbers, so like 42 brightness or 25 brightness, like that'll vary a little bit depending on what your target luminance is for SDR. But the point is to use a lower peak luminance setting when you can with a higher brightness number to get where you want to be. Alright, so history tabs 3 and 4 are with the peak luminance at low, and 1 and 2 are at medium. And so you can see how much of a drop there is on those full screen measurements. Like I said, it's about a 30 nit difference between 10% and 100% windows versus about a 10 to 12 nit difference on the peak luminance low setting. Alright, so now I'm going to switch over and show you exactly what ABL is. Again, some people seem to think, like when we're talking about the games getting dimmer or sports getting dimmer, that that's ABL, and it's not. That's ASBL, or anti-static brightness limiter, which the acronym sounds similar, but they're very different things. So right now the TV is still set with the peak luminance at low and the brightness at 42. So as this pattern here gets larger and larger, you're not really seeing any change in the brightness. It's just a very smooth increase in size with no noticeable change in the brightness, because we've reduced the aggressiveness of the ABL so much. But now if you were to have the peak luminance turned up really high, then you would see as it got bigger, it would get dimmer. Or if you were an HDR, it would be really bright when it's small, and then as it gets bigger, it would get much dimmer and it would be very obvious. So that's what we're doing, is we're trying to reduce that effect of it changing its brightness as it gets bigger. That means in very bright outdoor scenes, in shows or movies or games or whatever, you won't have any distracting change in how bright it is. Alright, so now I've switched it to peak luminance medium with the brightness down to 25. So between the smaller window and it going full screen, it's going to lose about 30 nits of brightness. So if you speed this up, maybe you can tell that difference. The fact that it goes so slow makes it hard to see. But now say you were max brightness and peak luminance on high, then that would be really easy to see how much dimmer it gets as it gets bigger. Now the other common thing that you see is people saying that LCDs don't have ABL, and that is not true. Even the QN90A, it will measure anywhere from 15 to 1800 nits at a 10 or 25% window, but then at your full 100% window, it's under 1000. That means it has ABL as well. It's just less noticeable because it can still get so much brighter. Now the reason that OLEDs have the ABL is because of how much energy or power it takes to drive the panel. So if you were to push full brightness to every pixel, then it would consume just way too much power, and due to regulations and power requirements and all that kind of stuff, there's just no way around it right now. The panels just aren't that efficient. LCDs have less aggressive ABL because they have the backlight, and it all has to do is provide energy to that backlight, and it's just not as energy consuming as an OLED would be driving each and every pixel. Now the other thing is, if you have, say, an edge-lit LCD or something without full array local dimming, those I don't see ABL on. So like the Samsung Q70A or something like that. It's the same brightness from your small 10% window up to full 100% window. Alright, well that's going to pretty much be it for this video. So just keep in mind, when you're setting up SDR on a Sony OLED, you want to keep the peak luminance setting as low as possible and just use the brightness setting to increase the brightness. Now again, if you're in a bright room and then you got to turn everything up anyway, that's a different story. But for your nighttime SDR viewing and you want to reduce ABL effect, just use the either low or off on the peak luminance setting. Just know that if it's off, you're going to be around 100-115 nits with max brightness. So I would suggest low, and then somewhere around 30 to 50 on the brightness setting if you want to be in the 150 to 180 nit range. Alright, that's going to be it for this video. Pretty short one today, but thank you all for watching. I hope you liked it. If you did, just a reminder to press the like button. That'll help me out, and I hope you all have a good one, and I'll catch you in the next one.